to go over factoring polynomials with 4 terms. Now, if possible, we are going to be able to use grouping to factor the polynomial. Okay, so let's take a look at this example right here. You have x cubed plus 4x squared plus 8x plus 32. Now, we have to check, because you don't really want to waste time. So you want to check to see if we can factor this by grouping. So what we have to do is we have to look at their coefficients. So here you have this group to look at, and then you have this group to look at. This group is going to be 4 over 1, because 4, the coefficients of x cubed is 1. So that's 4 divided by 1. So 4 divided by 1 is 4. And then for this group over here, it's going to be 32 all over 8. And that's also going to give you 4. Now, because they came out the same, they have the same value, we can go ahead and use grouping to factor the given polynomial 4 terms. So here's the procedure. Step 1 is to group the first 2 terms and then the last 2 terms. So we're going to put the first 2 terms. So we're going to take the first 2 terms and make it into a group. So x cubed plus 4x squared. Okay, so that's, and then we're going to do the same with the last 2 terms, make that into another group. So 8x plus 32. Okay, so that's step 1. Now step 2 is to factor out the greatest common factor from binomial. So you have 2 binomials, so each one you have to take out the greatest common factor. So tell me, what's the greatest common factor for this group? Well, the greatest common factor is x squared, so you're going to be able to pull out x squared. So when you pull out x squared times what is x cubed, so that's going to be x. And then x squared times what will give you 4x squared, and that's going to be 4. All right, so the greatest common factor is positive 8. So you can take out positive 8, and you're left with x plus 4. Now you can tell if you're on the right track by checking the binomials. So if you have the same binomials, so the binomial for this here is x plus 4, and the binomial for this group here is the x plus 4. So you have the same binomial, so therefore you know you're on the right track. So good job. All right, so right now we're going to move on to step 3, and that is to factor the common binomial out. So you're going to take the common binomial out. So your common binomial is x plus 4. Okay, so when you take out x plus 4 from here, you're left with the x squared. Okay, so then you have x squared plus, and you take out x plus 4 here, you're left with a positive 8. Okay, and then these are your 2 factors of the polynomial up top. And then step 4 is to check it. You can always check it. You don't have to if you're confident that you know you did it right. Okay, but for this example here, we're going to check it. Okay, so to check it, you are going to first distribute the x. We're going to multiply these 2 binomials. So distribute the x. So x times x squared, and then x times 8. So x times x squared is going to give you x cubed. And then x times 8 is 8x. And you are going to do the same with the positive 4. So distribute the positive 4. So 4 times x squared, and then 4 times positive 8. So 4 times x squared is 4x squared. And then 4 times 8 is 32. Okay, and then we're going to write the polynomial in order. So that means your x cubed is going to go to the front. Okay, so that's your leading term. So x cubed. And then x squared term is next, so that's 4x squared, and then the x term, and then your constant. Another one here. So let's look at another one. So here we have 3x cubed, take away 21x squared plus 4x minus 28. So we have a polynomial of 4 terms, and we're planning to use grouping to factor this, but first we have to determine if we can do that. So we're gonna break this up into 2 expressions. So here's the first one. We're gonna break this up into 1, and then here's the second one. All right, so within the first expressions, we're gonna check their coefficient. So here you got negative 21 divided by 3, and that's gonna come out to negative 7. And then on this side, we have negative 28 divided by 4, so that also comes out to negative 7. Okay, so this is good. So here's your procedure. So step number 1, it says to group the first 2 terms together and then the last 2 terms together. So we're going to group the first 2 terms. So 3x cubed, take away 21x squared. Well, that's going to be the first group. And then you have 4x, take away 28, and that will be your second group. Okay, so that's step 1. Now step 2 is to factor out the greatest common factor from binomial. So we're going to, each binomial, we're going to take out the greatest common factor. So looking at the first expression, binomial, what can we take out? Well, we can take out 3. 3 is your greatest common factor for the coefficient. And then we need to pull out an x squared. So we need to pull out 3x squared. So if you pull out 3x squared times what gives you 3x cubed? Well, that's just going to be x. And then 3x squared times what is 21x squared? Well, 3 goes into 21 7 times. Okay. Now we'll do the same thing over here. You got 4x minus 28. So we can pull out a positive 4. So positive 4 is your greatest common factor. And then 4 goes into 4x, x times. And then 4 goes into 28 7. And then you can check to see we're on the right track. And you can tell that you're on the right track if the binomials are the same thing. So you got x minus 7, and then you have x minus 7. So yeah, we're good. Okay, so we're on the right track. And then step 3 is to factor the common binomial out. So we're gonna pull out the common binomial. So that is x minus 7. So we're gonna pull that out. X minus 7. Then when you pull out x minus 7 here, you're left with 3x squared. And then when you pull out x minus 7 from this term, you're left with 4. Okay, and that's your answer. And then you can check it to see if it's right. Okay, and by multiplying these 2 binomials. And okay, we're not going to do it here, but you can check it. All right. Okay, let's go over another one. So here we have a polynomial, 4 terms. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this lesson, we are going to use grouping to factor this polynomial. But first, we have to determine if we can use grouping by checking their coefficient. So we're going to 8 over 16. And that's going to give us 1/2. And then over here, you have negative 3 divided by negative 6. And then when you reduce it, you also get 1/2. So 1/2 and then 1/2. So therefore, you have the same value. So yes, we can go ahead and use grouping. Okay, so here we're going to bring in the procedure of how to do it. We're going to go through it step by step. So here's your procedure. Step number 1. is to group the first two terms together and then the last two terms together. So we have 4 terms, so your first group is going to be 16x cubed plus 8x squared. So that's one group, so that's your first two terms. And then the other group, last two terms, is negative 6x minus 3. Okay, so that's step 1. Now step 2 is to factor out the greatest common factor from binomial. So the greatest common factor for this group is going to be 8x squared, so we're going to pull that out. Okay, so 8x squared goes into 16x cubed, is going to be 2x. And then 8x squared goes into 8x squared, that's going to be 1. Okay, so 8x squared times 1 is 8x squared. Now over here, your greatest common factor is negative 3. And when you pull out negative 3, you're left with 2x plus 1. And then you can check to see if you're on the right track if you look at the two binomials. So here, the first one, we have 2x plus 1. And then over here, we also have 2x plus 1. So we're good. We're on the right track. We just have to finish this up with step number 3. Okay, so step 3 is to factor the common binomial out. So we're going to take out the common binomial. So your common binomial is the 2x plus 1. So we're going to take out the 2x plus 1. So when you take out 2x plus 1 here, you're left with 8x squared. Actually, we're going to put parentheses around that. So here you're left with 8x squared. And then when you take out 2x plus 1 here, you're left with negative 3. Okay, so this is your answer. And then you can check it by distributing the 2x into 8x squared minus 3. And then the 1 into 8x squared minus 3. Okay, let's do one more. This is the last one for this video. So in this video, we're gonna use grouping to factor a polynomial with 4 terms. So here you got a polynomial and it has 4 terms. Now before we can determine if we can use grouping to factor this polynomial, we have to check it. We have to check the coefficient. 8 over 4. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. And then for this one, you have 6 over negative 3. And that's also going to give you negative 2. So because they came out the same, we can go ahead and use grouping to factor the polynomial. Okay, let's bring in the procedure. Here it is. So let's go through this step by step. So step number 1 is to group the first 2 terms and then the last 2 terms. So we're going to put the first 2 terms, make it into one group. That's going to be 4x squared y, take away axy. And then the other group is going to be negative 3x plus 6. Okay, so that's step number 1. Now step 2 is to factor out greatest common factor from these binomials. So looking at this binomial, what would be your greatest common factor? So let's see. We can pull out 4. So 4, we can pull out an x. And then we can pull out y. So 4xy is going to be your greatest common factor. And then when you pull out 4xy, you're left with x, because 4xy times x is 4x squared y, minus 4xy goes into axy 2 times. Okay, so over here, your greatest common factor is going to be negative 3. So we're going to pull that out. And then you're left with x minus 2. And then we can check to see if we're on the right track by checking the binomials. Let's see. So here we have x minus 2. And then over here, we also have x minus 2. So yes, we are on the right track. So we're going to keep going, and then that's to do step 3. Step 3 is to factor the common binomial out. So we're going to pull out the common binomial. So what is your common binomial? Well, that's x minus 2. So we're going to pull that out. And then when you pull that out, when you pull this out here, you're left with 4xy. And then when you pull out x minus 2 here, you're left with negative 3. Okay, this is your answer. And then you can check it by multiplying these two binomials. And it comes out to 4x squared y minus 8xy minus 3x plus 6. Then you know that you have the right answer.